tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today on the Italian Radio Hour, we are exploring something close to my heart: language, identity, and the voices that make up Italy's incredible diversity. My guest is Professor Roberta D'Alessandro, Chair of Linguistics, Syntax and Language Variation, and the head of the Linguistics Division at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. She's originally from Abruzzo and has devoted much of her research to studying what she calls not the Abruzzese dialect, but the Abruzzese language. So if you're now telling yourself, wow, the way that my grandparents spoke wasn't a dialect, but a language, don't go anywhere. Enjoy my conversation with Roberta, ma prima pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring, in person or online, to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. Roberta, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. That's very nice.
The weather in Netherlands is still holding up, or you're still you're already bundling up and getting your umbrella ready?
Precisely. It's cold and watery. There's everything that you can imagine about the weather in the Netherlands. That's what we have today. So.
Okay. Well, let's shed some light, some bright light on a very interesting topic for myself and the audience. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the Abruzzese language, obviously I would like to dive into your journey because you have built such a remarkable career in linguistics. So what first sparked your interest in how people speak? What was the moment you realized, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I don't know. It happened more or less by accident. I had started studying foreign languages. I did first. I did a minor in physics. Then I left physics and I started studying Russian. And while I was studying Russian, I came across linguistics, and it was really just meeting the right person, the right professor at the right time. I had two very good professors. Well, we were forced to take linguistics at university. So there was the compulsory linguistics course and then the language courses and literature of the foreign languages. So I had to take linguistics, and I got really flabbergasted by this topic of studying how language works and how children learn to speak and to communicate, but not just to communicate, how language is acquired, how children can develop language having so little stimuli, and all these questions. And now what similarities there are among languages and why they're different and how they are. So it's really an entire world. And I thought, oh my, this is so fantastic. So I wanted to study linguistics. And I went to study linguistics, and then I ended up at a summer school. So these professors that I mentioned, they didn't actually work directly on syntax. They worked on morphology and social linguistics and phonology. So what does it mean? They work more on words, and I work more on structure. So I didn't start with structure. I ended up attending a summer school in America at Cornell, and they wanted, and I went there to study the structure of words. Then I met a friend, just really a friend from Slovenia, a friend of mine. She said, oh, you have to come to syntax. That's more fun. So I went to take a class with actually two different syntax courses with two people who are now my colleagues, and I know them, and I told them, and I said, no, that's what I want to do. I want to study the way sentences are assembled in the human mind. And since then, that's what I've done. I started then 30 years ago, and I'm still trying to figure out how it works. Yeah.
We didn't mention what part of Abruzzo are you originally from?
I'm from Arieli in the province of Chieti, which
Mm-hmm.
is almost by the sea, just a little bit south of Pescara.
Mm-hmm.
That's, yeah, I'm in the province of Chieti, but I'm closer, I think, perhaps to Pescara, Ortona, Lanciano, so a bit of the south, not extreme south of Abruzzo.
And so you mentioned that you have studied and spoke and you speak other languages. So my curiosity is what drove you back to your roots? You could have pursued more with, again, the many languages you're already speaking. So why coming back home? Was there a specific event or you revisited some stories?
In a way, I studied Russian. So as I told you, I was very much
Ah,
into
vai,
Slavic.
говорим по-русски.
Yeah, поговорим по-русски. And I studied Slavic
По-английски,
philology.
по-английски.
По-английски. Okay.
По-английски. Let's
I know
stick
it's
to English,
English.
otherwise we're gonna put too
English.
many things in the pot.
Yeah, no, but I ended up studying that. I loved it, and I studied the philology, so the history of all the Slavic languages, and I was very much into it. And then I thought, oh, I want to study syntax. So this was the formal part, how languages assemble words together to form sentences. And I was actually working on, I don't know, all sorts of things, English, other things, Icelandic. At some point, I realized that my grandmother had a very interesting language. She had a very interesting phenomenon whereby she basically selected the auxiliary of the. So if you have to say I have gone or I am gone, etc. And I thought, okay, she has a very peculiar pattern. So I went to her and I say, Grandma, I remember the scene. We were by the fire, and I told her, Grandma, how do you say I uh, have eaten? So mangiato. I am eaten. That's literally. Si mangiato with you are eaten, but it means you have eaten. And then she says, what are you asking me? The verb? And I was like, wow, she knows. She was very old. She didn't go to school, but she remembered, she understood. So I started thinking, wow, the way she talks is so peculiar. So I went back and talked to my colleagues, and we started eliciting data from actually my own village, from my own family, from my own village, because I really, that happens very often, and not just to me, to several linguists I know, that you think you concentrate on, well, I studied in English. I was in, first I was for a while, while this happened, where I started working on English, I was on Abruzzese, I was in Canada. You think of English, you don't think of other languages. Then you all of a sudden realize that what your grandma speaks is a
Well,
perfect
suddenly know.
system,
Yeah. Mhm.
completely coherent. And you need to understand how things hold together.
Mhm.
It is so interesting because everybody studies English, but nobody knows this language, which
Mhm.
is our language. So,
Yeah.
yeah, then I never
And
left it.
And then, without going into a history lesson, but when
No,
we talk about Abruzzese, there might be some myths that we want to debunk as far as the influence of Abruzzese takes from this one language or that one language. Can you give us maybe some either historical events that might have impacted the language or some, again, myths regarding the language that they see Abruzzese coming from, I don't know, French, for instance.
that's a typical Abruzzese coming from French, because Abruzzese has our Abruzzese. First of all, Abruzzese comes into two fashions, because
Mhm.
there is the Abruzzese of the central Abruzzese, which is uh, actually Aquilano. We call this Aquilano, Sabino, which is a central variety. And then there is an eastern coast variety, which is us, which is the Abruzzese that we call. This is the Abruzzese I was telling you about. So there are two kinds of Abruzzese, the coastal Abruzzese and the Aquilano Abruzzese. So the Aquilano is central Sabino, and I mean, our dialect is southern. So Abruzzo has this line, so there are, in linguistics, we call these isoglosses. These are imaginary lines that divide areas in which a phenomenon happens in two different ways. So in this area, this phenomenon happens in this way, and in the above area, above the line, it happens in another way. Or below this line, there is this phenomenon above this line, or the side, it depends where the line runs. On the side, you don't have this phenomenon. On this other side, you do. Now, Abruzzese belongs to a big continuum, which is the upper southern continuum, which is the part that is Abruzzese, but the main variety that we know of that is Neapolitan. And this whole Neapolitan and then Barese, Apulo, Pugliese, etc. These are all one big area, linguistic area. And it is really, this area is really different or separated. It has different phenomena and different phonology and different ways of forming the words and different syntax than the central part, which is in the Abruzzo, in the L'Aquila side, and the extreme south. The extreme south is Sicily and Salento, Salentino. That's a completely different area. So the first division is between the upper south, to which Abruzzese, Molisano, Pugliese, and Napoletano, and all this area, upper south, belong, and everything else. And that is universally recognized as a separate language because these languages all evolved from history. So there was the first how can I say? First there was Italo-Romance. There was Latin, and then there was Vulgar Latin, and then they developed. They basically when the Roman Empire fell, and there was no joining, no strength that would join all the languages. So they were all speaking some sort of Latin. When it crumbled, there was nobody to keep these languages together. So every language developed in a different way. So in France, it went in one direction. In Spain, it went in another direction. In Romania, it went in another direction. And in Abruzzo, it came into another direction. They all fragmented. In Italy, there was a lot of fragmentation like everywhere else, but everywhere else, the states, the nations formed a bit earlier. So if you think of Spain and Portugal and France, they were already present for many years, whereas Abruzzese was only, the upper south wasn't so it didn't emerge so early on. So what I mean is, so what am I thinking? Let me think what I was saying, because now I lost my train of thought.
Nations formed much earlier.
The Roman Empire, there was a central strength that would bring everybody to speak Latin. Then they basically ended up all breaking up. And Abruzzese, as the upper southern, this is what I wanted to say, that is a separate language. It is like Spanish, like French. But Spanish and French and Portuguese, they had countries that were big and they were old enough and they were a unitary. They had, let's say, a unitary, more or less, not all, because Spain also has a lot of fragmentation. It has Galicia, it has Andalusia, it has all these little fragments. In Italy, there was a mess. Until 1860, there were 1,000 different states. So the fragmentation continued. And so if you look at the map of Italy as it was, there was Granducato di questo, Principato di quell'altro, Regno della Chiesa, Regno di Napoli, Regno delle Due Sicilie, Regno di questo, Regno di questa. They were all separate. And of course, everybody was closed into their own realm because people didn't travel so much as before. So when they had to speak to somebody outside their principality or realm, etc., they would use Italian, because Italian had emerged already in the 14th century, because Dante, Petrarca, Boccaccio. So this was the super language, super straight language. But the little languages stayed. And each little language stayed stayed in its own realm. So
Mhm.
what happened to us is we were Il Regno di Napoli. So you could really see the border of the language of the upper southern continuum there overlapping with the line, geographical and political line of Il Regno di Napoli, the realm of Naples. So that's how it worked. Now, Abruzzese is mainly influenced. So this is a continuum, but there's a part which is more prestigious, which was Neapolitan, and it had its own grammar formalization. It was used in all sorts of diplomatic acts. It was written for early on. We have attestations from early Romance. So we have attestations that go into the 12th century from Old Neapolitan. And then there was our part, the Abruzzese part, that was the language of the peasants. Nobody wrote it. We don't have any written attestation of our Abruzzese, the upper southern part, until the 18th century. We do have written Abruzzese, but that's the Aquilano. We have Buccio d'Aranallo, etc., etc. Our side, they didn't write it. So
Mhm.
it so was that, everybody thinks, and so the continuum of the Upper South got to be called Neapolitan because that was the most prestigious. But actually, the language kept fragmenting and it kept evolving. So now Abruzzese and Molisano are basically identical. Neapolitan is uh, different enough. I say it has phenomena that are different enough. It's very similar to Abruzzo. We understand each other. We are really very similar. If you hear Neapolitan, you're going to understand it. But the phonology, the selection of auxiliary, there are things that are different enough for us to say that we have a different language.
Mhm.
Though it is not as different as we are from Tuscan or
Mhm.
Sicilian. This is really another language. Now,
Yeah.
going back to your question, why do we think it is influenced by French? Because we have a lot of French words. We have a lot of French words because there was there was a short time of French domination, and there was also the domination of Spain. The thing
Mhm.
is, yes, we got and borrowed many words, but these
Mhm.
many words entered into Abruzzese through Italian very often. Sometimes they were because they were famous and they've entered in the whole of Italy. Now there is a problem that we have a kind of coincidence. We borrowed words from French when French was the language from which you borrowed. After
Mhm.
Latin, it was French for all Europe. But the phonology of Abruzzese, so the sounds, resemble those of French because we have this phenomenon which is called the neutralization of the final vowels. And
Mhm.
this is something like we use the schwa. So we say mam,
Mhm.
padre. We don't say mamma, padre, or mamma, patru, or whatever you want to say. We say and this sounds a lot like we have a lot of diphthongs that sound like French. So people made okay. We have a lot of French words. We sound like French, so it must be that we derive from French. This is
Mhm.
complete madness. No, I mean we're very far from French, and
It's
we
not derived, but it was borrowed. Now it's part of it.
some
And
words have
yeah.
been borrowed, but
Mhm.
word borrowing, like Machiavelli already taught us, if you borrow words, the words belong part of your language. So
Yeah.
if we borrow English words into Italian, that's still Italian. If you borrow French languages, sorry, words from French, that's still Abruzzese that's borrowing. But
Mhm.
the sounds evolved completely independently. So if you look at French grammar, it is entirely different from Abruzzese. It is just another language. It is similar to Piedmontese, for instance. So that's it. It's Gallic, but
Mhm.
it is not like Abruzzese at all, completely. So it is
Yeah.
completely crazy to think that.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful when you. Okay, sorry, this was a bit long, but
No, 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 but that's a great explanation because again,
thank
we
you.
wanted to go through the influences and the historical impact of what happened in Italy and what Italy looked like even prior to being Italy to explain why Abruzzese is a language on its own. And because I'm sure our heritage speakers would love to hear you more, giving examples, and so am I. Let's dive into some other peculiarity of the Abruzzese. So, for instance, before you said that by listening to your grandmother, we have in Italian, when we make the past tense, the choice either the verb to have, if you can kind of answer the question what or whom, mangiare, ho mangiato una mela. With in the Abruzzese language, that is not the case. We use the verb to be, which is usually used more for verbs of motion, and everything kind of uses that. So I know this is going to be a double-edged sword because any of my students are going to listen to this interview and they're going to start using S at all times. They're going to justify, well, it's Abruzzese. Now, anyway, there is another phenomenon, or at least an example that I heard you use in the past with the reflexive verbs. So again, just a little explanation. We have what we call the regular verbs, again, like mangiare, and then you have the object. And then we have reflexive verbs where the action is not really passed on to another object or another person, but stays within the subject. So a lot of daily routines, wash your hands, getting up, getting dressed. And tell us something about the expression related to the
Yeah,
past.
so yes, indeed. Yeah, you nailed it. Indeed, one of the peculiarities of Abruzzese, which is on the East Coast, but Napolitan has completely lost. So it is just gone in Napolitan, is this person, it's called technically person-driven auxiliary selection. So have and be are the auxiliaries that you use also in Italian. But as you correctly said, when you use have in Italian, you use it with transitive verbs or with some sort of other intransitive verbs that are not, for instance, verbs of motion or verbs of change of state. So if you have a verb of change of state, you say, sono cresciuto, I have grown, you use to be. And this is just deep, this means that the choice of be or have depends on the sort of verb you have, how the verb looks like, what its structure is. In Abruzzese, that's absolutely not the case. The choice of the auxiliary depends on the subject. So if the subject is first person, io, or we, I or we, or second person, you or you plural, the auxiliary will be invariably. It doesn't matter that you have a transitive verb, an intransitive verb, a verb of motion, verb of change of state, doesn't matter. You select be for the first and second person. So
Give us an
be,
example.
have. The pattern is does be
In
have, be
Abruzzese, in
have.
Abruzzese, so that we can
I'll give
hear.
you an example now. But just to tell, so first and second is be, third is have. So you have so mangiata, si mangiata, which in Italian would be sono mangiato, sei mangiato, ha mangiata, third person, have.
Which is
Sema
kind of the
manita,
one that
we
we're
are
accustomed
eaten.
to.
Yes, set manita, you are eaten. Amanit, again, have. And this is really independent of the verb. You can say sorrevat, sirrevat, so magnat, si magnat, so sunnat, so des, so vist, so it is so if it is I, if the subject is ye, I,
Uh-huh.
you will use so. So you will use to be. And this is very strange, very new, very strange. It is really peculiar. Abruzzese doesn't really, not many other languages have that. So that's really something peculiar to Abruzzese. And also it is a little bit, it's also in Molisano. It is also a little bit in the Apulian dialects, though the selection there is a little bit different. For Abruzzese, it is really very strict. So another thing that we do that not many languages do is that we agree the past participle agrees. So the verb basically. So the past participle is if you say sono andato, sono is called the auxiliary, andato, gone is the past participle. The past participle agrees with the plural. So if you have a verb like I've eaten spaghetti or I painted the walls, this is the example we used in a paper that is one of the most famous papers about Abruzzese for my field. So if you say I have painted the walls where I is one person and the walls is plural, you agree with the walls. So you say, so petite, plural, le mur. Now,
Ah.
if the wall is singular, the object is singular, and who paints is plural, we painted one wall, you agree with the plural. So you have again, sem, petite, numur. So we are painted plural. So the plurality goes with which, so you agree in the plural. It doesn't matter if it is the object or the subject. Now, this is really rare. There are patterns like this that are found in languages that are so-called ergative. So in Georgian, there's something
Mhm.
like this. In Basque, there not even this is something that is not found in Romance. It is found in Abruzzese. And in some other areas, you have agreement with the most important element in the clause, but this is really something that we are the only ones who do. Abruzzese Molisa, I mean, not just, but it is very, very strange, very
Mhm.
peculiar. So the verbs, yeah,
The
they
verbs are indeed
you have
a lot
something
of work.
really very cool in Abruzzese going on. Yeah.
Any sound combinations, the consonants at the beginning of the word that might be more of the Abruzzese language than other languages or that?
Yes, that's another one which we have. There is the approximant, tubular approximant. So there's this sound which is a, and that's really a rare sound to use. So when we want to, when we are in the beginning of a word or right after a vowel, we insert this r. So, for instance, let me say, let me think. So lagat, it's because it is linear. It is a kind of r, the G that gets linear. But let me think of, for instance, if you want to say, what do you have? In the sense of what's wrong with you, then you can say que a ri, cari. So this y is the verb. So what you have, y is the verb. So it is ka, re, yi. And this re is a rare sound. It is really not, it is epenthetic. It means that it appears between two vowels. And it is just very rare in the languages of the world to have this that we use all the time.
Mhm.
This is really a grandma sound.
So, well, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. And we're going to talk about maybe some stories from the field that you might have collected during your research. So, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Professor D'Alessandro.
Do you love Italian food? Want to learn the secrets of homemade pasta, sauces, and traditional recipes, just like Nana used to make? At Mondo Italiano, our authentic Italian cooking classes bring the taste of Italy right to Pittsburgh. From fresh pasta to regional specialties, every class is a delicious journey through Italy's culinary traditions. Spots fill quickly, so reserve your seat today. Call us at 412-478-2681 or find us online. Mondo Italiano, where Italy comes alive one dish at a time.
Un caffè, per favore. For more than 35 years, Pittsburgh has started its mornings with La Prima Espresso. From freshly roasted beans from around the world to the perfect espresso or cappuccino, every cup is crafted with care. Stop by and enjoy the warmth of our baristas and familiar faces, or bring the taste of Italy home. Order online today at laprima.com. La Prima Espresso, Pittsburgh's coffee. Okay, for those of you who are just tuning in, Abruzzese is a language, it's not a dialect. It has been the study of many, many years, the research of Professor Roberta D'Alessandro. And we have discovered, or at least personally, I'm learning quite a bit about how this language differs from many others, and the mistake that people might have made in the past, calling it a dialect because it has its own structure. And Roberta, if I can just call you by your first name. You have been in this field for 30 years. There is probably a lot of data collection. The question first, before getting into the fun stories, what questions were you asking yourself? Because when you do research, it's not just about the findings, is how you set up your research. What do you want to discover? What do you want to study? So what were some of the questions you were asking yourself?
Well, I'm a theoretician, so the first thing I want to have is to find the law of language, and I want to understand how you derive Abruzzese from any other language. What is the little thing, the little twitch that you have to push so that Abruzzese, so why, for instance, Abruzzese looks like Mayan. So one thing that we have, for instance, which is also not found anywhere else, is that we have, so at least in my variety, we have one thing which is called prepositional accusative differential object marking, which means basically sind a me. Sind a me, sind a te. So when you have the object which is animate, that's Spanish has that, you mark it with this a. Now in Abruzzese, it is not supposed to be so. There are several papers that say that you shouldn't have a division there, like first and second versus third, like the auxiliary. So you should be, if you have this a, you put it everywhere. So you say, senda me, senda te, senda esse, senda quel. We don't. On the third person, we don't put it. So I tried to force my mother to say, senda me, senda te, senda a Maria. And she goes like, no, this is Neapolitan. So we have this restriction. So what does this mean? How is this possible? Why do we have this sort of first and second versus third division, which is so strong? And you find, again, in Hindi, you find it in some languages or in some, in Mayan languages, in Georgian languages, you find some sort of contrasts that are pervasive that you find in other languages that are totally unrelated. So this is where I started. Why? Because there is something, we're all human. So we all work with the same brain, the same software, the same hardware actually. So I started thinking, how is it possible that we have some things that we share with Hindi or with the agreement things, or we share with Georgian, but with Basque, but not with Romano or not with Tuscan. That was the first sentence. That was the beginning, how I started. Then I went into, more recently, like 6-7 years ago, we wanted to have a conference. And we said, okay, let's invite people who work on heritage, Italian. And we couldn't find anybody working on heritage dialects, because the dialects are a bad thing. You shouldn't speak them. You should speak Italian. So even a lot of heritage do not want
the stigma on
yeah, exactly. So I wanted to understand what happened to these languages when they enter in contact with other languages like English, but also other languages that are of the same family, like Spanish. So Abruzzese, not because of the domination, but because they are of the same group, is very, very similar to Spanish. We have ser and estar. So, so simpático, mas tem gestang. This is ser, ser and estar. It is nothing else. But so I wanted to know what happens to these auxiliaries when they get in touch with Spanish or with Portuguese. So we started studying. So I said, well, nobody did it, then I do it. So I applied for a grant. They gave it to me. And that's what I've been doing in the last 6-7 years. By the way, I mean, I haven't been there 30 years doing this. I wish, but I mean, I'm not that old and not that experienced, but I started linguistics almost, say, 26, 27 years ago. So
yeah. So how are these interviews conducted? Because I'm sure also with today's anonymity, it needs to be polished. And do you find that people are actually complying with that, keeping the interviews anonymous, or do they want to just tell you their name, their family's members' names, and
Exactly. So you already asked. So first of all, in this latest, before when it was before this Mayan thing, etc., I did it myself. But I did it in Abruzzo, so it was much easier to go around and meet people directly. This one with the heritage speakers, it was a big group. So each one of us had a different area. And I couldn't travel right then because I was supposed to go to New York actually, and I couldn't travel because of some personal reasons that I had to cancel. So people in my group did it. But anyway, we all got the same thing, and you can hear it from the recording because there is one thing in Europe, which is also the same in the US. It's called GDPR, Global Data Protection Regulations, which means that you have to anonymize, not even anonymize, you have to pseudonymize because you have to be able, you need to pseudonymize the name. For instance, I want to collect data from you, Viviana. So what I do is I ask you, then you have the right to pull back, to say, no, you are not going to use my interview anymore at some point, at any given moment, which means I have to know who the person is who gave the interview, which means I need to know who you are. So there is one person who knows who the person is and has the mapping to your pseudonym. So I will call you speaker A. So whenever you decide, oh, I no longer want to give you permission, then I go back and I say, oh, this is speaker A. Who was that? So there must be somebody who keeps this. And this is really hell because universities have their internal regulations. The EU puts a lot of stuff. So basically, we had to do this for the US, and the US has their own protocols. Canada too, and we have agreement. But Argentina and Brazil don't. And so they expected us to do this, and they expected us to produce certificates that said that Argentina and Brazil had to collect the data according to European regulations. So there had to be a data protection officer local who could check that we would work in agreement with Argentinian law and European law, which was completely crazy. But in the way, we found a way with some colleague doing this. But then you go to the speaker and you go to the speaker, you meet, I don't know, Antonio de Messina, and he wants to tell you a story. And you have to say, well, dear Anton, first of all, you have to say, you have the right. So there's this thing that they have to sign, which is informed consent. Now, not our target were speakers who left Italy right after the war, so very old, and possibly who hadn't gone to school, because we didn't want Italian to interfere. I wanted to know what Abruzzese does in contact with Sicilian does, not Italian. So we had to exclude all the people with higher education, which means that you are going to a 90-year-old to explain that you want to do linguistic research, that it will be anonymous, that they have to, click to see reaction time of a 90-year-old. You have to give them stimuli that are the same stimuli that everyone else will receive in Canada, in the US. We had to pre-record them. So this is incredible. So the first thing is like, you say, please, you shouldn't reveal any detail that can make you recognizable. Identifiable because of privacy laws, because of the GDPR. So the very first thing they say is like, okay, my name is Antonio Di Pasquale. This is a made-up name. I was born here, here, and there, and I moved here, and my wife is this and that. Okay. And then the next step is, my neighbor had an affair with this lady who lived there. The sister of the guy who came this and blah, blah, the brother of compare Antonio, etc., etc. And so we had to record this. It was really hilarious to listen to. We had to clean it up. So we had to edit all the data. The data that we collected went into, we also have actually an interactive atlas. I can give you the link. So where people can upload their recordings and talk and tell their story in their language. And it is very nice. You can also listen to it. You can hear what they have to say, but it doesn't go directly public. It has to go to us. We listen to it. We have to remove all of the details,
The
the
details.
date of birth,
That's
place of
interesting,
birth,
though.
name, and stories about the neighbor having an affair. We have to remove all this, and then we put it online. So this is so the first thing is European regulations do not really go hand in hand with what the speakers want. They want to tell their stories and they want to be acknowledged. So this is very important. Then the fact that you have to go to people who are elderly, we wanted to see, so we wanted to check the input that the heritage speakers, so the children, the people who are born in the US, for instance, what input they receive from their parents. So we wanted to record the parents, the children, and possibly the grandchildren. So now the parents were quite elderly, so they couldn't hear the stimuli and we couldn't repeat them. So sometimes, you have your laptop and you have a stimulus like, okay, pick between Sovista Maria, Sovista Maria. That's, you have to pick which one. They couldn't hear it well. You couldn't repeat it because if you repeat, you're tampering with the stimulus. And so the scientific experiment doesn't go. Then you had to do things on screen, put some of those who, especially those who went to migrated to Argentina and Brazil, they are not familiar with laptops, computers, and so you have to push the button if you recognize, no way, they don't even know what it is. Reaction time for elderly people. So in the end, we had a big section in which they could speak freely and we could cross-check what happens. But eliciting data from that population is not the same as eliciting data in a lab, where you have people who know what they're doing, they understand instructions. Another thing we couldn't do is ask very often for signing the informed consent. This was particularly problematic in rural areas in Argentina and Brazil, where if you go there with a sheet, these people cannot read, you scare them. You're like, what am I signing? Am I giving you my house? What am I doing?
A little bit of
we had
skepticism, not knowing.
yeah, but it's normal. It is so we actually in the end had anthropologists sign a document say that this is really not acceptable. It is not culturally acceptable to do this.
Yeah.
So the European regulations that are dreamt of by a number of bureaucrats, highly educated people in Brussels, do not keep these kinds of necessities into account. Not everybody can write, not everybody can read, not everybody can understand instructions and informed consent, especially if they are people who are illiterate. And this is not meant badly. This is exactly what we wanted to know. We just said they have the language, which is the thing that is most important. You just need to respect cultural borders. You can't just do as you like.
Yeah.
And this was interesting, but it was fantastic when they started telling stories about.
Yes, you find out more about.
For anonymity.
Yes. So yes, at some point, any link to either people being able to upload their stories, that will be useful. So one point that we want to stress is because, again, when we talk about especially the young children, if Abruzzese is a language, children that do speak Abruzzese and Italian are bilingual. Okay.
Of course.
So let's talk about the benefits because I think one of the key points out of this conversation is to encourage and speak the language at home with no shame because you can tell us from your point of view the benefits in the development of a child who is bilingual.
Right. So indeed, not just Abruzzo. So the point is that in Italy, there is this tradition, and they somehow refuse to call these languages for some reason because it's tradition. And there's nothing wrong with dialect. Say if there's nothing wrong, why don't you call it a language? So why do you have to call it a dialect? Because it doesn't have the in the case of Neapolitan, Sicilian, Veneto, etc., they even have a written tradition. So it is really completely absurd to keep calling these important languages
Because
dialect.
we do have like the Friulan, and we have others that have been recognized as
Exactly.
languages.
Sardinian and Friulian have been
Yeah.
recognized, but this is just political. These are all completely separate languages, so it doesn't matter if you recognize them or not. It is not that the moment you give it the seal of me, then it becomes a language. A language is language. It was a language already before. So
Mhm.
now, if you speak more than one language, it is so you have two systems in your mind. Now, children do not struggle with two languages. It seems like it. They might develop two complete languages with a little bit of delay because they have to handle two different systems, but they do not have, actually, as you say correctly, it is an advantage to speak more than one language. Because, first of all, well, for attention, this is something, so there is a lot of myth and things that have been exaggerated of how good bilingualism is. But bilingualism is really important because, for instance, when you speak one language, the other language has to be kept at bay. So if I'm speaking English now, I have to silence Abruzzese, I have to silence Dutch, and I have to silence Italian, that are the other languages that I'm speaking every day. So if you silence this, it means your brain is able to concentrate. So this improves your attention. And this is something like really cognitive beneficial to the brain of a child. What is the decision-making process seems to be better in bilinguals. So if you have to decide between one or two options, you do it faster if you're bilingual. The acceptance of another worldview is also very common in bilinguals because they see the way grammar is organized. The grammar is organized differently. Sounds are different. They are exposed to two different systems. There's nothing wrong with two different systems. With difference, with diversity, there's nothing wrong. So they learn very soon that there are other ways of codify reality that are equally fine. And so they're very good at understanding situations, at mediating, at doing things, understanding diversity and difference. So all these things are really very important. Being fast decision maker, but especially the attention, silencing one and moving the other. And actually studies nowadays there's more and more studies in code switching, not just from the social linguistic side, but from the cognitive and formal side. Code switching is like you change language in between. So you do, like we're doing a little bit, parliamo italiano, dopo un po' usiamo English, and then this is not accidental. So it has been shown, sorry for the sun, now it feels like I'm saying something really, the sun is out and now all of a sudden I'm in the spotlight. So what happens is these switches do not happen randomly. So there have been a lot of studies that show that you insert a word or an expression in a specific structural position, which means that the children can map perfectly one grammar to the other, which is a very difficult, very high cognitive task, which means that there really is no disadvantage in being bilingual. In fact, it is that's the common situation, not just bilingual, but multilingual. This is the normal situation for human beings. We started thinking you need to speak only one language and very well with Napoleon in the 19th century. And since then, when we started the idea of one nation, one language, one religion, one people, but this is something superimposed. And then people started doing this. So basically, Europe and North America are really impaired in this sense because they kind of grew up with one language, one person. That's completely crazy. And the rest of if you know, Africans, they speak 10 languages each. The language to speak with your wife, the language to speak with your neighbor, the language to speak with, it's completely different and they're perfectly functioning. So the language needs to be spoken. And very often it happens that grandparents speak to grandchildren, whereas the intermediate generation is skipped. And this we see also in other countries, in Wales, for instance. So they're revitalizing Welsh, but it is mainly grandparents speaking to grandchildren. So you need to keep speaking because it is only good to know one more language. And
Yeah.
we will not use Abruzzese to go and speak to the president. You never know. At some point we might be. But no, it is good. It is good for so many things for your children. So you're kind of, they have a treasure and you're taking it from them if you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
It's I don't see why you would want
Yeah.
to do that.
I wish like schools or local governments or cultural institution would do more to help preserve Italy's regional languages. Because like for me, I've been here now in the US for 30 years and have this quest for to learn more about traditions, not only just about Rome. Actually, I'm very much interested in Abruzzo, Sardinia. I just came back, almost like an obsession. We're to the point where those generations are dying out. There is no one to answer those questions, and once it's gone, it's gone. And the
Correct.
point of tradition is to be kept alive, maybe with some variations because culture, languages evolve, but there has to be a stronger effort, I think,
Absolutely.
360 degrees also from the authorities to preserve, and not just from the scholarly point of view, but from the practical, everyday.
And the problem is always the same. I mean, there are even linguists in Italy who object to that because they say, well, then you have to build a fictional language which doesn't exist. And this is, if you want to teach Abruzzese, which Abruzzese are you going to teach? Are you going to teach Abruzzese from Pescara or from Vasto? Or are you going to teach Aquilano? Catalan is also exactly like Abruzzese or Napolitan or Sicilian. It has 1,000 different dialects. So they pick the main ones, they teach these, and then everybody speaks the way they want because you adapt it. It is not as if Italian was spoken exactly in the same way by everyone. In Italian, we have exactly the same. There's a norm that we use for writing. And then everybody, your Italian is different from mine, which is different from the next person. Everybody speaks differently with different words, with different sounds. We still understand each other, and the language is not dead and it's not dying because we refuse to pick one variety because that would be, oh, no. We have to preserve the dialect. It has to be pushed down. It has to be kept
Yeah.
as inferior to the national language. This is so wrong on so many levels. But there's no way. I mean,
Yeah.
also the Italian linguistic community should help a little bit more. And some
Yeah.
are doing. I mean, not that the politicians would listen to one or the other,
Mhm.
but it would be good if they all
Yeah.
spoke with the same voice
Yeah.
about how important it is.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I volunteer in nursing homes. I assist with patients that are affected with dementia. The average age is 90, and they're coming from many different parts of Italy. There, the situation is twice as complicated. One, because of the disorder they're suffering from, and two, because they have these very tight dialects that the average interpreter that has not been exposed to many other Italian languages so forth feels powerless. I mean, they're not useful. So they call me because I've been around, and it's also a way of assisting our Italian citizens
Of course.
abroad.
Of
And
course, it is just,
so
I
it's not
don't
just
see any.
Italians in Italy. There is a huge need. It's an unspoken need, but there are so many cases that, if people heard their stories, and they're also coming once they speak, first of all, the consent forms and so forth, there is the whole cultural, that these people that age don't really understand those questions, no matter if you're telling them in dialect or in Italian.
Of course.
But once they're put in this position of recounting stories from the past, because that's their strength, they feel that they're like back home, living with their family. The cultural events that they have shared with me or habits is priceless. But again, it's all in their local language. And so we need to do more
Indeed.
to preserve that. So,
Also record it. I'm going to send you the link of the atlas for data crowdsourcing so that people can record. We asked the young people to record 5 minutes or 10 minutes with their elderly, and we can put it there so that it stays. Also the sound of the language, not just the grammar. It has to stay, as you say. It is so important in so many levels, and I don't see what it is really like. You have a box full of money or gold, and you want to throw it into the ocean. You say, "Oh, I'm going to let me dump it into the ocean. I don't need it." Why? Why? It's important for practical reasons, as you say. It is important for cultural reasons. It is important for scientific reasons. It's understandable to understand how language works. So speak the language. That's the only thing you can do. You have to use it. Because I can't do anything. I had to relearn it. My parents were among those who taught Italian. So they spoke only Italian to me. Abruzzese with each other. My grandparents didn't speak Italian. So at least I was very much exposed because I come from a village. So, but I had to relearn it. But they can write as many papers as you want in the most important journals you like. That's to save the language. The language is really saved by the speakers, and possibly should be taught and recognized.
Yes.
Because otherwise people feel inferior, especially Southern people with this accent that we have. Everybody thinks Abruzzese. First talks I gave in Abruzzese about Abruzzese when I start with Italians, when I just started speaking Abruzzese, everybody would burst into laughter because it's so funny. It's okay. I mean, I don't mind, but it's just a language. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It is, because it's the most beautiful. But anyway, not everybody agrees.
So we want to ask then to our audience, if you are from Abruzzo or have family roots there, maybe tonight is a good night to try a few words in Abruzzese at the dinner table. And you might be surprised by how natural it still feels. And so I want to thank Professoressa D'Alessandro for helping us rediscovering the beauty of Abruzzese and for reminding us that every language, no matter how local, carries an entire world of stories, emotions, and history. And but unfortunately, our time together is up for today. Il Big Ben ha detto stop, and it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. And we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube and where you catch your favorite podcasts. And also don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. So again, I would like to thank my guest, Professoressa Roberta D'Alessandro. We will be sharing the Atlas link and any of your publications that.
And if anybody wants to participate I'm looking now into some things on Abruzzese heritage, so please contact me, because I would like to elicit some data at a distance.
Wonderful, wonderful. We will definitely put all that information, invite everyone to participate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano and La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. How would you say a goodbye? How would you part ways in Abruzzese?
Arrivederci.
Arrivederemo. Ciao ciao a tutti
Ciao
quanti.
signori. Ciao, arrivederci.